In the late 1990s, I was spending every Saturday in the neighborhoods, we call them the Crescent, where most crime is perpetrated. There's a lot of poverty, and it opened up my eyes to how other people live. There's a difference in the symptoms and the causes of a problem. The symptoms, like poverty, we see homelessness, we see hunger, we see people just without. But that's not the cause. For many of them, the cause is they just don't have a job. Now the question becomes, why don't they have a job? Lack of education, lack of work experiences, addictions, and criminal records. And that's when the idea came about how do we create jobs to lift them out of their hopelessness. I know that the Bible tells us to take care of the poor, but it doesn't give us an awful lot of detail how to do that. And so it kind of made sense for me thinking that if we could give someone a skill and an opportunity, they could move from the low-income population. Hope Initiatives is a faith-based social enterprise which runs businesses to achieve its social mission of helping to restore lives that have been damaged by incarceration, poverty, addictions, and it achieves that mission by operating businesses, teaching people skills such as welding, carpentry, moving and storage services, CNC, and then giving them an opportunity to be employed. Many of them are employed by us. We focus on ex-offenders because after women and children, ex-offenders make up the third largest subset of people who are in poverty. When an ex-offender tries to get a job, there's a lot of rejection, and any job that may be available is typically low-paying. Getting a job is a mountain to climb for them. A felony conviction can be a life sentence. When they are released, it can be a sentence to poverty or back to crime, but it doesn't have to be that way. We help support the individual in terms of how do they get an identification? Where can they find a clean, affordable house to live in? How can they get food for their family? And everything else that probably a lot of us take for granted. Having a job is a step in the right direction. It's a start. But they need encouragement, they need hope, they need to realize their importance, they need to understand that their past is their past unless they choose to make it the future. I feel very satisfied for what has been accomplished at Hope Initiatives because I've seen lives change.
I started teaching in 1969, fourth grade, and very early on, I realized that the fastest learners in my class needed very little of me. The children that needed more time or who were slower needed a great deal of my time and my attention. And I was really drawn to that. I was drawn to, maybe it goes back to my roots as a child. My dad said you always go for the underdog. I was told that my passion for helping children to get A's was quaint but not paying the bills. And I said, you tell that to the parents of the children, that the one child who has a learning challenge is not worth it. And that's when I went to the Sisters of St. Joseph and said, we've got to do something. Hope Hall is a private, non-sectarian school that was established for children who learn differently. We start at second grade and go through 12th. We have 170 students. The children at Hope Hall have a blessing and a curse at the same time. The blessing is they don't look any different from anybody else. The curse is they don't look any different from anybody else. Most of them have central auditory processing delays. Many are on the higher end of the autism spectrum. Many have attention deficit hyperdisorder. They all learn at a slower rate, and they were falling through the cracks. People will very often not give them any breaks or take the time that they sometimes need because they don't look like there's anything wrong. So our job and passion is to get them as ready for that world as we possibly can, to develop as many compensatory strategies for them as we possibly can, and to teach them how to advocate for themselves because they're going to have to do that from the time they leave Hope Hall on. I tell the parents they're going to see a lot of plants around our school. You're going to see some cactus. Those cactus get watered once a month. That's all they need. You're going to see trees and philodendron. They get watered every Friday. That's what they need. And you're going to see African violets. And they need a little bit of lukewarm water Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's what they need. And when they're all given what they need, they can flourish. There's nothing wrong with your son or daughter. They're an African violet that's been in a culture built for the philodendron. And at Hope Hall, we specialize in African violets. So this is a ceremony that we've done for 22 years now. These I can't statements are really important. And the kids who have gone before you all thought the same way you did, that there's something they can't do. And every one of us buried that one thing that we knew we were going to work on this year. Our children are told all the time that they're not able to. They think they can't have friends. They think they can't learn, and it's because they've been in places where they don't get picked for teams, they don't have friends, they don't get invitations to birthday parties because they're viewed as being dumb. They try very hard to pay attention. It's very difficult for them. It's not their fault, but they're told over and over again, you're unfocused, you're lazy. Hearing that they can do things and that this year is going to be different and they can pick one thing that they want to work on, and we're going to help them to erase that. They can bury their I can't, they can watch the plants grow, and they can watch themselves grow inside and know that they really can do what they want to do. Honestly, prior to this honor from the Farash Foundation, I hadn't much thought about what I've accomplished. I feel that I was a voice that spoke for the children. There's a lot of people who heard that voice, who embraced that vision, who have helped me build this school for these children, and I never take that for granted. There's not a day that goes by that I don't say, this was absolutely worth it.
There is a concept called tikkun olam, the Hebrew words meaning to repair the world. And I feel so deeply and passionately that that is what I'm all about. That is what gives meaning to my life.
There is a hidden victim during times of high unemployment, the battered wife. And as Ellen Harris reports, why a slow economy can make it tougher for battered women to receive the help they need.
When I first started working at ABW in 1978, we had a part-time hotline just 4 days a week in a church basement. A friend had called and asked me to help support these volunteer counselors, and when I went and listened, I heard how overwhelmed they were because there were no services they could use to save a life. We needed to broaden our services and to look toward educating and changing the entire community's attitudes. There was a blame the victim attitude. What did this person do to provoke the violence?
And there are cases where maybe a man shouldn't respond with physical abuse, but he's been verbally abused for a long period of time. And he is now letting off that frustration. It's unfortunate it's in a physical way. And I go back to the adage of probably some of our society's norms, boys will be boys.
The police tended to blame the victim. They asked her what she did to provoke the violence. They sent him for a walk around the block, and they did not necessarily really help her get to safety.
Doesn't it fall within the police officer's discretion when he gets into one of these situations, when he or she gets into one of these situations, to try to size it up? Don't we have to depend upon their experience?
Let me ask you whether the police officer has to size it up when he sees an assault on the street or when he has been called to a situation of an assault on the street.
Well, I think that you're getting into a different constitutional area, though, when you're walking into somebody's home and you're mediating a family dispute on private property.
When there has been an assault, however, the victim has the same right to protection as any other victim of an assault.
We needed to change the way every aspect of our society looked at domestic violence. We talked to anyone who would listen. We talked to legislators, we talked to community groups, we talked to schools, we did training, we did conferences. We went everywhere and told everyone. Today, a victim of domestic violence is far better supported in the legal system than she ever has been before. In the early days, a woman would go to court. She had nobody there in this incredibly intimidating setting.
Women, and it was mostly women then, came here to file a petition to get an order of protection. The abuser may be sitting right on the other side, and there was no way to escape his glare, his intimidation, the fear that produced.
We were able to get a table put in the waiting room so that a volunteer could go and accompany her into court, tell her what her rights were.
Imagine being here with your children, and you'd have to go into the courtroom with them. There was nobody else. So we have had a room where there are some toys and there's somebody there to watch the kids when the petitioner goes into court. There was no court program when I began. Court advocacy provides someone with a supportive and knowledgeable individual to go into court with her. It's a combination of Alternatives for Battered Women and Legal Aid Society.
By the time I had retired, I think the community was far more aware of domestic violence and far more willing to support the services to help those who were victims of domestic violence. When we toured the courtroom, I was overwhelmed by all the changes that I saw and very, very pleased that I could be a part of the change that made that happen. We began this small, and look how large it had become. That was overwhelming.
We have two children with developmental disabilities, Bob and Karen. As they started to grow older, we realized that we needed help. So we tried to figure out where to go. We looked at other agencies in Monroe County and also through different states, what would be the best place for them, because we knew we were going to need help somewhere down the line. Mary Carriola Children's Center, they had them up to the age of 21, but then where do you go then? So that's how we got started, by as a personal mission in a sense to our children as well as a couple other children that really had no place to go. So that's where we started the homes. It was always interesting when you're working with the state. They're used to things staying pretty status quo most of the time. Status quo needs to be challenged from time to time. And I think one of the interesting and good things about our agency was that we were willing to challenge. When they would say no, we'd say, we'll show you how to do it. When we built our first home, we built in skylights. It doesn't cost that much more to build them in, but it brought in sunlight from the outside. We had a porch added on. And these were things that the state was not used to. So as we explained why we did it, they were very encouraging about it. And it also became a standard for them as they went forth, because they knew it made a difference in the quality of life of the people that are being served. The state started to look to us. as for ways of being innovative, of being willing to take a safe risk. And we saw that change, and that was something that was really inspiring to us and motivating to us to keep us going. Currently, we have a little over 80 homes. We have probably around 35 different day program sites at the current time. Retreat center, a farm, respite programs. Environment is all the difference in the world. If you got the right environment, you got much happier people, much happier employees, and everybody gains on that. One of the real positive advantages of having 2 children with developmental disabilities and they're in a group home is that if I saw something that was not the way that we thought it should be, I would extrapolate that and say, well, maybe that's happening in more homes. So they really are my vision. My children are they're 54 and 47. They were only expected to live less than 6 months. But again, my children just continue to live, and they live a good life. They got a better social life than I've got. I'm proud of what we've accomplished all together as an agency. I was in the corporate world before, but there the focus was on the bottom line. Here the focus is on the bottom line, but the bottom line is people being served.